Hello YouTube, this is Arkham Manor Endgame #1, and this is the first issue of Endgame, as you may have noticed, to not contain the New 52. That's because it's a Sin Convergence issue. The New 52 is over! And the cover is okay. It's kind of misleading because it indicates that these characters who are chemically altered and immune to Joker gas have been Jokerized. As we see in the book, as I just said, they aren't, so it's a kind of misleading cover. And for some reason, Clayface's eyes are on fire. Yeah, I don't like the cover, but once we've got past the cover, the rest of the artwork is, generally speaking, great. It's gritty, it's dark. You can kind of, it's weird, you can kind of see influences with, well, you can kind of see influences with Bullock from the guy who played him in the TV show, but he's in Gotham, but he's still kind of a little burlier in the face. So it's an interesting thing, but that's kind of off topic. They've got, I think, 3 different artists on this, each of whom has a kind of similar but kind of different style to the others. And the Joker in this, you may notice when you start reading, he doesn't really look the way Joker has been looking in this Endgame arc. He kind of looks the way he does before his face grew back. Yeah, watch my previous videos to understand why his face grew back. And there's a very distinct reason that he doesn't look the way he does in the rest of Endgame, and I'll get to that later. But before that, I do have one problem with one of the artists. I'm not entirely certain which one it is, but one of the artists on here has a tendency to do something that I find really, really annoying, and that's add red lines as emphasis for things, which often come across as red splatters. Particularly, this is more the colorists, I think, than the artist, but even so, the artist shouldn't have drawn that for the colorist to color, I don't think, because this unnamed Arkham guard, who is our main protagonist here, slams his hand onto the desk, and there's a huge blood splatter, only it isn't, it's just to emphasize the fact that he slammed his hand down. I spent quite a while looking at that, thinking he'd done something awful to his hand, and his hand was bleeding. But he didn't, because it wasn't even mentioned later on. It was just emphasis on the fact that he'd slammed his hand down. There's a similar panel with this here, in which Victor Zsasz slashes at one of the security guards, and you have a realistically dark red blood splatter coming off here, and then a huge blood splatter coming off here, which is a different shade of red and doesn't match with the lighting in the room. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I cannot work out what's going on here. Why are there 2 completely different blood splatters, and why is only one of them going in the right direction? It does not. I'm not a fan of this style, really. There's another problem, which is that they tend to use really... one of these artists tends to use really big black lines for shading, which can really confuse you as to what's supposed to be an actual feature in the room and what's supposed to be shading. Let me just find one, because I wasn't entirely certain if there was supposed to be a plant growing in the corner of the room for a moment. There. It took me a little while to realise, no, that's shading. Anyway, on to the story, now I've finished talking about the artwork. Actually, I'll just go back to one thing about the artwork. If you haven't noticed, a lot of the artwork seems to be very heavily inspired by the Batman Arkham Origins game, particularly the designs for the Joker. I just looked at that and I thought, this is screaming inspiration by Arkham Origins. And particularly a lot of the colouring as well, the sort of greens and blacks. It seems very, very reminiscent of that. But anyway, the story is interesting. It's all being told by this Arkham guard, who I said I'm pretty sure he isn't named throughout this whole thing, but he's being interviewed by a very sort of miffed Harvey Bullock. Of course he's miffed. There's Joker zombies all over the place. And he's telling the whole story while not being trusted by Harvey Bullock, who doesn't trust him because he used to work for the Joker. Not the Joker, sorry, the Penguin. I had Joker on my mind because it's a Joker book. So, he recalls how the Joker invades Arkham, sets loads of the prisoners free, and releases Joker gas, and the prisoners go on a killing spree, killing, basically, I think, every single staff member at Arkham at the time is probably killed. He says, I tried to save everyone. I really did. But like I said, it was just too much, and too many paid the price of my failure. Like Danielle DeMeglio, beaten to death by her friends she had lunch with earlier that day. Sorry, that was not very good voice acting by me. Just too many. Too damn many. But yeah, you see, this Danielle DeMeglio, she's just this innocent Arkham nurse who's there to help people, and she gets grabbed by these inmates who she viewed as her friends, and she was helping these people, and she was even having dinner with these people, but because they were so far under the influence of the Joker's toxins, they barely even recognize her and they don't care about her. And not only do they beat her to death, but this woman, she has her foot about to stamp on her neck, and you see her ready to stamp, and then you just see this, and that is such a haunting image of this dead nurse. And the Joker, whilst all this awful stuff is going on, and this guy is being forced to work with some chemically enhanced people who can't be affected by the Joker's toxin in order to escape, while this awful stuff's going on, you also get this fantastic fight between a Clayface that was working for the Joker and this Clayface. I'm not entirely certain which versions of Clayface they are, because, let's be honest, there's just too damn many versions of Clayface. But I love the way this one, I'm guessing this is Basil Carlo, says, "Oh no you don't, you damn fake! There's only one Clayface, you hear, and I'm it." And when he grabs the skinnier Clayface, you just get this big, his lip just goes woof. That was very immature, I apologise, but it's just fantastically drawn. The skinny Clayface almost looks like he should be in a Casper cartoon. And basically, the Joker does this fantastic taunting of them while they're trapped. Seriously, I really recommend reading some of this. It's superbly written. Little taster. He says, "Now this is my favorite part of the movie, where our heroes think it was just about over, that they'd found a way to save their worthless little lives, only to have it yanked away from them at the last minute, only for them to finally come to terms with what everyone in the audience already knew all along, that they're never gonna make it out of here alive." And just that expression as he says that, there is such pure evil in those eyes. One thing I notice about this book, which is interesting, is that for some bizarre reason, I'm not really a fan of it, they keep changing the colour of his eyes. In some panels he has blue eyes, in some panels he has brown eyes, in some panels he has red eyes. I'm not sure if they're intentionally doing that. Like here, blue eyes. Brown eyes, red eyes, blue eyes. I'm not sure if they're intentionally doing that to sort of as a symbolism for different frames of mind, or if it was just a colorist being a bit thick. But certainly his frame of mind seems rather constant in this, which is homicidal maniac. With that said, when our irritated Arkham guard punches him, it turns out he might not be who you think he is. Or is he? I'm not going to spoil the ending. The ending is worth reading because it's very interesting. Very, very interesting. And it really says something about the psychology of a certain character who, until this point, we didn't even know was in this book. If you look at Jeremiah Arkham, the same crazy guy who's the Arkham psychiatrist whose mind sort of broke down in the pre-New 52 and became the second Black Mask. This really expands on his descent into madness, because until this point we thought he'd regained his sanity somewhat, because he was working to help people. He was working back in Arkham. I just assumed that he'd been able to get his act back together in his head. And this really showcases in this issue the fact, after where I left off, the fact that he really hasn't, and you really get to see what's going on here, and you know that he'll be probably the most haunted person by these actions. I mean, we don't know if Arkham was working by himself in this issue. Personally, I think because of... I'm just going to ruin the ending if I describe why. I think, personally, that he was probably working with the Joker for reasons which you will see when you read the book, if you read it, if you haven't already read it. But I very thoroughly recommend this book. It's generally well drawn, but it's very well written. I mean, very well written. All in all, I'd give it about 3.5 out of 5. The only reason it's dropped those 1.5 is because the red things really, really bug me. And the cover's a bit misleading and annoying. As an actual story, though, it's really good. Really, really good. Really worth a read. And that's it. Join me later this evening when I shall be reviewing Gotham Academy Endgame. Thanks.